Admit, y'all kind of want this thing. I mean, it looks better than some SH figure arts these days. We got quite a doozy of a cold opener for this one.
It's Godzilla! It looks like Godzilla, but due to international copyright laws, it's not.
Actually, it was all a dream in Doremi's head, likely influenced by this little Kaiju fanboy. However, both him and Doremi were picking bad times to fantasize about their next big all-monsters attack, as it was math class. In the case of the latter, she managed to shock Seki into rubbing a little bit of her equation onto her cheek. I'm pretty sure that should just leave a big white splotch on her cheek, but that's far from the biggest leap in logic in this episode. Anyway, this did at least give her the opportunity to interact with our obvious spotlight character, as she recollected the big lizard, who will go unnamed throughout this episode, and this Ryota kid recreated. Just use your interdimensional forehead to pull a kaiju from across the universe. As punishment for their inattentiveness, Doremi and Takun were forced to clean the gym. This inconvenienced the boys' soccer team teammates who wanted to practice for their upcoming game. You're taking on a team from the Tropical Rouge's hometown? Is that game going to be emceed by this dude as huge schnoz? However, Takun was unable to participate as he was busy working on a free-range art project that their class had been assigned for an upcoming exhibition. The Ojamajo worked on their own projects, with the most impressive being Hazuki's Utena cosplay. Doremi was also working on her own project, and okay, what the hell? I swear, I didn't edit in that cut that was actually something from this episode. Seriously, I let you rewind this scene just to make sure I didn't skip anything, because that was just an awkward cut. I think the biggest problem with it is the fact that Doremi was kind of cut off mid-sentence and didn't have any sort of pause or transitional line to move to the following scene. I don't know, it just feels kind of disjointed when we go from her being surprised over Hazuki's project to this new scene at the beach where they talk about Doremi's project. Anyway, we learned that Doremi was trying to recreate Majorika's human form for her project. As for Takun, he was doing a little trial run for his. Well, clearly, this monster is based off of Zilla. The Ojamajo also ended up playing along. I would have said Megalon. That poor guy got completely overshadowed by Jet Jaguar and a certain meme. On that note, the Ojamajo later saw Ryota's kind of impressive collection, though there was also a severe lack of variety. Like, seriously, kid, where's your three-head dragon, or the big moth, or hell, the male version of your big lizard friend? You're never gonna become a jobby at this rate. I mean, to be fair, YouTubing was probably something he needed to start considering, since he wasn't getting a good grade in school, which his mom chewed him out over, and like many a parent to a fledgling figure collector, threatened to throw out all of his stuff. Keep up the fight, little warrior. In the middle of all of this, we also got a few rather superfluous scenes of stuff like Majorika learning about Doremi making a model of herself, or Ompu inviting Takun to the next big lizard movie where she was going to play that one needless kid in the film. But yeah, while these weren't necessarily bad scenes, they did interrupt the flow of the episode's plot, which was about to reach an emotional climax. Having spent the afternoon completing a very impressive 1/70th scale model for the exhibition, Takun was elated until his teammates came in to also chew him out for missing out on the game, which they lost. They even called him a Kaiju otaku. You say that, and yet the Lizard vs. the Monkey movie was one of the highest grossing films of this year. I mean, granted, it didn't have much competition, but still. And yet, this led to him throwing a tantrum and even destroying his work. Now, this should be the big emotional climax, and don't get me wrong, this scene of Takun running and his teammates regretting their teasing him was all well done. But the lead into all of this kind of felt sloppy, to say the least. I mean, the components were all there. Takun being scolded by both his mom and his teammates are what set him off, and if these scenes had been relatively close together, then I think it would have made a lot of sense. However, as we already went over, that's not exactly the case. On top of the Majorika scene, we also had the Ompu scene where he was absolutely overjoyed at the thought of seeing the next Kaiju film. So to go from that to this, it doesn't exactly match up all that well. Hell, there was even an earlier scene where Kotake seemed to be cool with Takun's hobby, and yet here he joins in on the tease. If these scenes had been removed, and maybe even replaced with some more build-up to his mounting frustrations with everyone getting on his case about his hobby, then this would have had a lot more impact in my opinion. Looking through this episode's staff, I don't think this is the fault of the director, who, by the way, sadly passed away in 2006. Rest in peace, Yasuo Yamayoshi. But more likely, this is the fault of the writer, Natsuto Kitagawa, whom, as far as I can tell, their only credits are this episode and one later the same season, and nothing else. This just tells me this person was an amateur who never bothered to refine their craft by doing little things like not overloading their scripts as though this were an uprising or something. Anyway, the Ojamajo of course tried to cheer up Takun by using the magical stage and giving it a very vague request, and yet somehow it worked. Though it would take a little time to take effect, as Takun ended up cleaning out his room by then. It really seemed like they had failed until night came when... So, let me get this straight. Curing a whole town of cursed items was outside of their wheelhouse, but summoning this knockoff lizard was a-okay? I mean, I get it, they received a few promotions since that episode, but damn, that's a hell of a leap. Where were these girls during the first few Legendary films?
Let them fight.
Well, whatever. As again, the direction this episode was quite solid, other than these kind of weird little cut-ins. I mean, this one kinda made sense as it was depicting the big lizard as being pissed off by the kid for dissing him earlier. Thus, Takun gave chase to try and make amends with the Kaiju, whom I'm pretty sure could blast him into smithereens. Okay, never mind. This thing is clearly based off of Gamera, and this kid is his personal Kenny. Jokes aside, this was actually a really well done sequence, really getting across this Kaiju's massive size. A technique that sometimes even actual tokusatsu fail to get across. And after satisfying Takun's wildest dreams while giving his teammates nightmares for weeks, he was able to go to school the next day and reconstruct his model. His teammates, having reflected on their actions and likely being fearful of being eaten by the giant lizard, helped in the reconstruction. And with that, the episode ended with everyone's projects being exhibited, including Doremi's ode to, Ben? This episode had some interesting concepts and a great message about accepting whatever fandom you're a part of, but at the same time, I do think it could have been executed just a little better. My biggest point of contention was, of course, the script, and how it might have needed at least a few more drafts to trim off the fat of a few unnecessary scenes, which only served to hamper the most important moments in this episode. The climax was still fantastic, especially for Kaiju fans. In fact, I still really liked this episode due to at least a slight bias for the big monsters. That said, I really wish I could have loved this episode if the big emotional scene had just hit a little harder for me. It almost seems like some of these scenes, like Kotake empathizing with Takun, were meant to go somewhere, but ultimately didn't pan out for whatever reason. Yet, also for whatever reason, they kept them in. To me, this really did feel like an amateur script, and considering that Kitagawa didn't seem to do anything afterwards, tells me that he was a no-bad writer who just couldn't contribute much of anything. Which is a shame, because there are good ideas here about not being ashamed of your hobbies or passions, and considering this is a magical girl show talking about Kaiju, that in of itself has multiple layers of commentary available. And I do get the feeling that Kitagawa wanted to cover this stuff, but they just couldn't articulate it all that well. As a result, what should have been a straightforward thorough line for this episode's plot was muddled by pointless or even seemingly dropped subplots. The components were there, and in spite of everything, they were still really well directed. This anime actually managed to capture the feel of an actual kaiju movie fairly well, though again, not much competition. But yeah, because of those scenes and the staff clearly having fun with all of the kaiju references, I can't really hate this episode. I just wish it was just a little bit better. After all, if Sinful Gear has proven anything, it's that magical girls and kaiju can work well together. And yeah, really sorry. I know I said I was going to do a double review this week, but I ended up having a lot more to say about this episode than I originally thought. Plus, Monday was pretty busy for me. Maybe I'll try again in another 2 weeks, but for now, I should probably start buckling down and finish up that Toy Trinity video. I know if anything, y'all want to hear what I think makes for a good Precure lead, and who I think best represents that. So look forward to it. Until then though, farewell for now my friends, and oh my god. Is that? Someone rubbing a resin-coated glove across a base! Not even really kidding, that's how they make it. Look it up.